Hello and welcome. Tonight, we delve into one of the most haunting paradoxes faced by those who transcend mortality through the darkest of arcane arts. You find yourself considering a question that may never have crossed your mind, yet once posed, it resonates with a peculiar profundity. What happens when you can never sleep again? Not when insomnia troubles you for a night or a week, but when sleep itself becomes an impossibility, forever removed from your existence. This is the reality for the Lich Queen, and this is her dilemma. Imagine for a moment that you have achieved something most mortals only whisper about in fearful tales. You have become a Lich through rituals unspeakable and sacrifices profound. You have torn your soul from your body and imprisoned it within a phylactery, an object of power that anchors your consciousness to the material plane. Your heart no longer beats, your lungs no longer draw breath. Your blood has ceased its eternal journey through mortal veins. You are undead, a being that exists in defiance of the natural order, sustained not by life, but by arcane force and the stubborn refusal of your soul to move beyond the boundaries of existence. The transformation is not merely physical. When a mortal wizard undertakes the ritual to become a Lich, everything changes. The warm flush of blood beneath skin becomes cold stillness. The constant symphony of bodily sensation, the gentle hum of life itself, falls silent. You no longer feel hunger, though the memory of hunger may linger for years or decades. You no longer feel the exhaustion that weighs upon mortal limbs after a long day. You do not age. Your flesh may wither and decay, revealing the bone beneath. But this is transformation, not deterioration in the mortal sense. You have become something else entirely. In the Forgotten Realms, and across the many worlds of dungeons and dragons, the Lich represents the pinnacle of necromantic achievement and the nadir of moral descent. To become a Lich requires not only immense arcane power and knowledge, but also a willingness to commit acts so heinous that most wizards, even those who walk darker paths, recoil from the precipice. The ritual demands death, not just your own death and rebirth, but often the deaths of others, innocents whose life force fuels the dark magic that will remake you. The phylactery itself must be created through processes that corrupt the very weave of magic, binding your soul to an object through chains of necromantic energy. But why would anyone choose this path? You might ask yourself this question as you consider the Lich Queen in her tower, surrounded by the trappings of power, but divorced from everything that made life worth living. The answer lies in what Lichdom offers: immortality, true and absolute. A Lich cannot die of old age. Disease holds no threat. Poison is meaningless. Even when the physical form is destroyed, the phylactery pulls the soul back, reconstructing the body over time. For a wizard who has spent decades or centuries accumulating knowledge and power, the prospect of losing everything to the simple passage of time becomes intolerable. Death is the enemy, and Lichdom is the ultimate victory over that enemy. Yet victory comes with a price. And that price extends far beyond the evil acts required to achieve undeath. When you become a Lich, you gain immortality, but you lose something equally fundamental. You lose the ability to sleep. This may seem trivial at first consideration. Sleep is merely rest, a biological necessity that wastes 8 hours of every day. A Lich has no biological necessities. The undead body does not grow tired. Muscles do not ache for relief. The brain does not demand the restoration that sleep provides to living creatures. You are free from this weakness, able to pursue your studies and schemes without interruption. Every hour of every day yours to command. But sleep is more than rest. Sleep is more than the simple cessation of consciousness while the body repairs itself. For mortal beings throughout the multiverse, sleep serves purposes both physical and metaphysical. During sleep, the mind processes the experiences of waking life, consolidating memories, discarding what is unnecessary, strengthening what is important. During sleep, the boundary between the material plane and the plane of dreams grows thin, allowing consciousness to drift into realms where the normal laws of reality hold no sway. During sleep, the soul itself finds respite from the constant demands of existence. A Lich has none of this. From the moment of transformation onward, consciousness continues unbroken. This much is documented clearly in the lore of undead creatures. Liches do not sleep. There is no rest. There is no respite. There is no gentle descent into dreams, where the troubles of the waking world fade into phantasms and possibility. What this means for the subjective experience of a Lich, for the inner life of consciousness that never dims, can only be inferred from their observed behaviors and the rare accounts that exist. But the fundamental fact remains certain. The Lich Queen stands in her sanctum, and she is aware. She works at her spells, and she is aware. The hours pass, the days pass, the years pass, and based on everything we know about the nature of undeath, she remains aware, her consciousness an unending vigil that knows no relief. This is the dilemma. This is the price that few consider when they undertake the ritual. Power and immortality, yes, but also an existence that removes one of the most fundamental aspects of living consciousness. You have gained everything and lost something you did not know was precious until it was gone forever. The Lich Queen can never sleep again. She can never dream again. She can never experience that blessed darkness where the self dissolves and reconstitutes, where burdens lift and the mind finds peace. In the lore of Dungeons and Dragons, Liches are often portrayed as beings of supreme power and terrible malevolence. They command vast magical abilities. They orchestrate schemes that span centuries. They accumulate knowledge and treasure beyond mortal comprehension. But beneath the power and the terror, there exists a being who made a choice, and that choice has consequences that extend into every moment of an existence without end. The Lich Queen in her tower is powerful beyond measure, but she is also trapped within a consciousness that can never rest, a mind that can never stop, an awareness that continues forever without the mercy of oblivion. As we explore this dilemma together, you will come to understand the true nature of what has been sacrificed. You will see how the absence of sleep shapes the existence of these undead beings. You will learn what they have tried to do to reclaim what was lost. And perhaps you will come to appreciate something you take for granted every night of your living life: the ability to close your eyes, to let consciousness fade, to sleep and to dream. These are not weaknesses. These are gifts, precious beyond measure, understood only in their absence. The Lich Queen stands eternal. She is aware, and she will never sleep again. To understand what the Lich Queen has lost, you must first understand what sleep means for those who still draw breath. In the Forgotten Realms, and across the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons, sleep is not merely a biological function. It is woven into the very fabric of existence, connected to magic, consciousness, and the structure of the multiverse itself. For a human living in Waterdeep or Baldur's Gate, sleep arrives as a natural consequence of the body's rhythms. As the sun sets and darkness claims the sky, exhaustion builds within mortal flesh. Muscles that have worked throughout the day grow heavy. The mind that has processed thoughts, emotions, and sensations for 16 or more hours begins to slow. Consciousness, that bright flame of awareness, starts to flicker. You lie down, you close your eyes, and within minutes or perhaps an hour, you drift away from waking reality into the realm of sleep. What happens during those hours is more complex than simple rest. Your body undergoes numerous restorative processes. Muscles repair microscopic damage from the day's activities. The immune system strengthens its defenses against disease. Growth hormones release, promoting healing and regeneration. But these physical processes, while essential, represent only part of what sleep accomplishes. The mind also transforms during sleep. Your brain shifts through different stages, each serving specific purposes. During the lighter stages of sleep, your consciousness hovers near the surface of waking, processing recent memories and experiences. Information gathered during the day is sorted, categorized, and filed away into long-term memory or discarded as unnecessary. This is why sleep improves learning, and why a difficult problem sometimes becomes clear after a night's rest. The sleeping mind continues working, organizing and making connections that the waking mind might miss. Then you descend deeper. In the deepest stages of sleep, your consciousness withdraws almost entirely from the external world. Your breathing slows. Your heartbeat becomes steady and quiet. Brain activity changes in fundamental ways, producing slow delta waves that sweep through neural tissue like tides across an ocean. This deep sleep is when the most profound restoration occurs, when the body and mind recover from the accumulated strain of living. But there is another stage, one that connects to realities beyond the material plane. Rapid eye movement sleep, the stage during which you dream most vividly, represents a state where consciousness touches something greater than the physical body. During these periods, the boundary between the material plane and the plane of dreams grows thin and permeable. Your consciousness, freed from the constraints of waking awareness, drifts into realms where the normal laws of physics and logic hold no power. The plane of dreams exists as a distinct reality within the cosmology of Dungeons and Dragons, sometimes called the region of dreams, or simply the dreamscape. This plane overlays the material plane like a shadow or reflection. It is a place of pure thought and imagination, where the collective unconscious of all dreaming beings creates landscapes, encounters, and experiences that feel absolutely real to those experiencing them. When you sleep and dream, according to planar scholars and those who have studied such phenomena, a part of your consciousness actually travels to this plane, walking through realms built from memory, desire, fear, and creativity. This connection matters profoundly for understanding what has been lost. Sleep is not simply turning off consciousness for 8 hours. Sleep is a journey, a transformation, a passage between states of being. When you sleep, you leave the material plane in a very real sense. Your body remains behind, vulnerable and still, but your consciousness voyages elsewhere. You might dream of flying through impossible cities, confronting manifestations of your deepest fears, or speaking with people long dead. These are not mere illusions generated by neural firing patterns. According to the cosmology of the planes, these are actual experiences occurring on another plane of existence. For spellcasters, sleep carries additional significance. Wizards, sorcerers, clerics, and other magic users require rest to restore their magical abilities. A wizard who has cast their prepared spells throughout the day cannot simply force more magic through sheer willpower. The arcane energies must be replenished, and this replenishment occurs during rest. The traditional method requires 8 hours, though not all 8 hours need be spent sleeping. The process of preparing spells after rest is well documented in magical texts throughout the Forgotten Realms. A wizard wakes from sleep and spends approximately 1 hour in focused study and meditation. They review their spellbook, reading the intricate notations and diagrams that describe each spell. They trace the patterns in their mind, rehearsing the somatic components, the verbal incantations, the mental frameworks necessary to shape raw magical energy into specific effects. This preparation fills their mind with potential spells, holding them ready to be released with a final trigger when needed. But the preparation cannot occur without rest first. A wizard who has been awake for 24 hours, who has cast their spells and exhausted their magical reserves, cannot simply study their spellbook and prepare new spells. The rest must come first. The mind must be refreshed. The connection to the weave, that vast network of magical energy that permeates all reality, must be restored through the quietude of sleep or trance. Different races experience sleep in different ways, and these differences reveal important truths about the nature of rest itself. Elves, those ancient people whose lifespans stretch across centuries, do not sleep as humans do. Instead, they enter a trance-like state of semi-consciousness that lasts approximately 4 hours. During this trance, they remain dimly aware of their surroundings, their minds turned inward, but not completely severed from external reality. They experience memories of past lives and distant ages, a form of dreaming that connects them to the deep history of their people. This elven trance accomplishes the same restorative purposes as human sleep. After 4 hours of trance, an elf is fully rested and can prepare spells just as effectively as a human wizard after 8 hours of sleep. This demonstrates that the exact mechanism matters less than the fundamental act of withdrawal from full consciousness. Rest is not measured solely in hours of complete unconsciousness. Rest is the act of stepping back from constant engagement with external reality, allowing the mind and body to turn inward and restore themselves. Dwarves sleep more soundly than humans, often requiring full 8-hour periods, but sinking into such deep slumber that waking them proves difficult. Halflings are light sleepers, waking at the slightest disturbance, yet they still require their 7 or 8 hours. Dragonborn, tieflings, gnomes, and all the varied peoples of the realms each have their own relationships with sleep, but all share this fundamental need. Living creatures must rest. Consciousness cannot continue unbroken indefinitely. The mortal mind and body require periodic withdrawal, periodic restoration, periodic journeys into the quietude of sleep. Even beings of great power recognize this necessity. Ancient dragons, among the most powerful creatures in all of creation, still sleep. A great red dragon might slumber for years or decades atop their hoard, entering a state of torpor that conserves energy and allows them to persist through ages. They do not need to sleep as frequently as shorter-lived creatures, but the need itself never entirely vanishes. The gods themselves are said to experience forms of rest, though the nature of divine consciousness remains mysterious to mortal understanding. Sleep also serves as protection against certain threats. The mind that never rests becomes vulnerable to madness. In the Forgotten Realms, there are documented cases of individuals who, through magic or curse, were prevented from sleeping. Without exception, these individuals descended into insanity within days or weeks. The mind is not built for continuous operation. It requires the restorative cycles of sleep to maintain stability and function. Dreams, even nightmares, serve as release valves for psychological pressure, allowing the mind to process trauma, fear, and stress in symbolic rather than literal forms. The magic of sleep itself is recognized and codified in the arcane traditions of countless cultures. The spell simply called sleep is among the first that apprentice wizards learn. A simple but effective incantation that forces creatures into sudden slumber. More powerful magics can extend sleep into days or centuries, can influence dreams, can use sleep as a gateway for possession or mental manipulation. The entire school of enchantment magic intersects with sleep and consciousness, recognizing that the sleeping mind is more vulnerable and more accessible than the waking one. There are also creatures whose entire existence revolves around sleep and dreams. Night hags, fiendish beings from the lower planes, invade the dreams of sleeping mortals and feed upon their fear and suffering. They use an object called a heartstone to become ethereal, allowing them to approach sleeping victims and torment them with nightmares so terrible that the victim may die from sheer terror. The fact that such creatures exist and specifically target sleeping beings demonstrates how fundamental and universal sleep is across the cosmos. If sleep were not nearly universal among mortal creatures, night hags would have no prey and no purpose. In the city of Waterdeep, in the great library of Candlekeep, in the halls of the Blackstaff Tower, scholars have written extensively about sleep and its mysteries. They understand that sleep is biological necessity, magical requirement, and metaphysical journey, all woven together. They know that proper rest is as important to a wizard's power as the quality of their spellbook or the rarity of their components. They teach apprentices that attempting to push beyond natural limits, to remain awake through multiple days to accomplish urgent work, inevitably leads to diminished performance, mistakes in spellcasting, and potential disaster. This is the world of sleep that mortals inhabit. This is the cycle of waking and dreaming that gives structure to days and meaning to nights. This is what every living creature experiences from birth until death. And this is what the Lich Queen gave away when she drank the potion of transformation and felt her heart stop beating for the final time. She can never sleep again. The biological necessity has been removed along with all biological function. The magical requirement has been altered into something else entirely. The metaphysical journey to the plane of dreams has been severed absolutely. She is awake, and she will remain awake, and no dawn will ever bring her the gift of exhaustion leading to blessed unconsciousness. This is her reality now. This is forever. The moment of transformation defines everything that follows. You stand in your ritual chamber, surrounded by the components of your dark work. The phylactery sits complete, glowing with malevolent energy, already containing the arcane sigils that will bind your soul to the material plane. In your hands, you hold the potion of transformation, a vile concoction of poison mixed with the blood of a sentient creature whose soul you have already sacrificed to your phylactery. This is the culmination of years or decades of study, preparation, and moral descent. This is the threshold between life and undeath. You drink. The liquid burns as it passes your lips, scorches your throat, ignites agony in your stomach. The poison works quickly, and you understand in this moment that you are dying. Your heart races, then stutters, then stops. Your lungs seize. Every cell in your body begins the cascade of death, and you feel it all. The pain is absolute. This is not a gentle transition. This is violent death by poison, and you experience every terrible second of it. Then something else happens. Your soul, that essential spark that makes you yourself, tears free from your dying body, but it does not ascend to the fugue plane to await judgment. It does not travel to whatever afterlife your deeds in life have earned. Instead, it is yanked violently into the phylactery, imprisoned within the object you created specifically for this purpose. The phylactery holds you, binds you, anchors you to existence with chains of necromantic magic that cannot be broken by death. Your consciousness remains. Even as your body lies dead upon the floor, even as your heart sits silent in your chest, you are still aware. You exist within the phylactery now. A soul trapped in an object experiencing reality through magical senses that have nothing to do with eyes or ears or flesh. And then the magic pulls you back. The phylactery containing your soul reaches out to your corpse and reanimates it. Negative energy floods through dead tissue, restoring a mockery of function. Your eyes open, but they are no longer truly eyes. Your body rises, but it is no longer truly a body. You have become something else. You have become undead. The undead condition in Dungeons and Dragons represents a fundamental violation of natural law. Life and death are meant to be separate states, distinct and divided. A living creature has a soul bound to a functioning body through natural processes. A dead creature has a body that ceases function, while the soul departs for the afterlife. These are the two states that mortals understand, the two conditions that define existence. Undeath is neither and both, a corruption of the natural order that creates beings who are dead yet animate, who have souls yet lack the vital force of life. For a Lich, the nature of undeath is particularly complex because of the phylactery. Your soul is not within your body where it belongs. Your soul sits trapped in an object, perhaps hidden in a distant location, possibly on another plane entirely. The body you inhabit is essentially a puppet, animated and controlled through the magical connection between your imprisoned soul and your undead flesh. According to descriptions of liches from those who have encountered them, this manifests in their movement. They glide slightly above the ground or walk with movements that seem subtly wrong, as though the body is being moved by will alone rather than by muscles and tendons responding to biological impulse. Your senses change as well when your mortal eyes decay and rot away, leaving empty sockets. Light still burns within those hollow spaces. Magical texts and accounts from those who have encountered liches describe these points of radiance as organs of supernatural perception. The common color for these lights is red, though purple and blue have been documented among liches of particular power or origin. You perceive reality, though whether this perception operates through principles similar to mortal sight or through entirely different magical mechanisms remains a matter of scholarly debate. What is certain is that liches can see, and many accounts suggest their vision often penetrates illusions and false appearances that would fool mortal eyes. Your voice becomes another construct of your undead state. The exact mechanism is not fully documented in magical texts, but liches clearly speak without breath or functioning vocal anatomy. Based on observations of undead spellcasters across centuries, it appears sound is projected through magical means rather than biological mechanisms. This would explain why descriptions of Lich encounters often mention voices that sound hollow, echoing, or layered with unnatural tones. You do not need breath to create sound. You do not need vocal cords to produce speech. You think the words, and magic carries them into the world as vibrations in the air. But the most profound change, the one that is consistently documented across all accounts of Lichdom, is that you do not sleep. This is not a choice. This is not something you can overcome through force of will or magical research. Sleep is a biological function, and you no longer have biological functions. Your body does not grow tired because it is not alive. Muscles do not accumulate fatigue toxins because no metabolism operates to create those toxins. Your brain, such as it is, does not require the restorative processes of sleep because it is not actually a functioning brain in the biological sense. It is dead tissue animated and puppeteered by your distant, imprisoned soul. Instead of sleep, you experience unbroken consciousness. From the moment of your transformation forward, you are aware. Always aware. Continuously aware. There is no dimming of perception, no fading into rest, no gentle descent into dreams. The lore is explicit on this point across multiple editions of the game. Liches do not sleep. How this continuous awareness affects the subjective experience of a Lich is rarely documented directly, as these beings do not typically submit to interviews or detailed examination of their mental states. But comparing accounts of newly transformed liches with those who have existed for centuries reveals consistent patterns of behavioral change that suggest profound alterations in consciousness over time. The meditative trance that liches use for spell preparation differs fundamentally from sleep. According to the established mechanics of Lichdom, this trance typically lasts 1 to 2 hours and serves purely to restore magical capabilities. During this meditative state, you remain fully conscious and aware of your surroundings. You do not close your eyes and drift away. You do not lose connection to external reality. Instead, you turn your attention inward while maintaining complete awareness of everything around you. This resembles the elven trance in some ways, but even the elven trance involves a dimming of external awareness. For you, as a Lich, based on what can be inferred from how undead consciousness functions, there is no dimming. There is only a shift in focus. During this trance, you impress upon your mind the magical words and energies that compose spells. You review the patterns, the incantations, the mental frameworks necessary to shape raw arcane power into specific effects. This preparation fills your consciousness with potential magic, readying spells to be released when needed. After the trance, You are refreshed in the sense that your magical capabilities have been restored. But you are not rested. Rest implies a need that has been satisfied, a weariness that has been relieved. You do not experience weariness. You cannot experience weariness. You are undead, and weariness is a property of living flesh. The continuous nature of Lich consciousness is well documented in terms of observed behavior, though the subjective experience of this state remains largely unknown. Liches rarely discuss their internal experiences, and those who have been questioned about their mental state often provide answers that suggest profound alienation from mortal patterns of thought. Based on their observed behaviors across centuries, the obsessive focus on narrow research areas, the difficulty relating to mortal concerns, the paranoid surveillance systems, we can infer that consciousness without sleep creates psychological conditions vastly different from mortal experience. The phylactery itself adds another layer to this strange existence. Your soul, trapped within the object, maintains constant connection to your body, no matter the distance. This connection transcends normal spatial limitations. Your phylactery could be hidden on another plane of existence entirely, and you would still function, still perceive through your body's magical senses, still cast spells, and interact with the world. The connection is absolute and unbreakable as long as both phylactery and body exist. When your body is destroyed, whether through accident or assault, the full nature of this connection becomes apparent. Your consciousness does not fade. You do not die. Instead, you experience a sudden violent return to the phylactery as the animating force is torn from your destroyed corpse. For a period ranging from days to weeks, you exist purely within the phylactery, conscious but bodiless, aware but unable to interact with the external world. Then the magic activates again. The phylactery reconstructs your physical form over hours or days. The process is automatic, requiring no effort or decision on your part. The phylactery simply pulls you back, reconstructs your body, and returns you to the world. This cycle of destruction and reformation can continue indefinitely as long as the phylactery remains intact. You are, in a very real sense, unkillable through conventional means. Adventurers might destroy your body 12 times, 100 times, and each time you will return, reformed and ready to continue your existence. Only the destruction of the phylactery itself can truly end a Lich. If the phylactery is destroyed while your body still exists, your soul is suddenly freed from its prison and immediately travels to whatever afterlife awaits you. If both body and phylactery are destroyed simultaneously, you simply cease to exist, your soul moving on without the chance for reformation. But maintaining this undead existence requires a terrible price. The lore is explicit that a Lich must periodically feed souls to the phylactery to sustain the magic that preserves body and consciousness. The official 5th edition rules describe this as using powerful magic to trap both the body and soul of a living creature inside the phylactery. The phylactery can hold only one creature at a time. Over a period of days, the trapped creature is consumed and destroyed utterly. Nothing short of divine intervention can restore them to life. Their soul is annihilated, fuel for the dark magic that sustains your undeath. The frequency of this feeding varies somewhat in different sources, but most indicate that a lich requires a soul sacrifice approximately once per century, or as needed to maintain their form. This is not a frequent need by mortal standards, but it is absolute. If you fail or forget to maintain your body with sacrificed souls, you begin to deteriorate. First, your sanity erodes. Then your physical form starts to fall apart, flesh sloughing away, bones becoming brittle. Your ability to cast your highest level spells diminishes. Over decades or centuries of neglect, you risk transforming into something called a demolich, a vastly diminished form consisting primarily of a skull. All higher consciousness and power lost to madness and decay. This requirement creates one of the central moral horrors of lichdom. You have achieved immortality, yes. You have transcended death, yes. But your continued existence demands the regular consumption of sentient souls. You must murder thinking, feeling beings, and destroy their souls completely to sustain yourself. There is no alternative. There is no way around this requirement. Undeath, for all its power and permanence, is sustained by the annihilation of life and soul. This is the curse that accompanies the blessing, the price that must be paid for immortality. The nature of undead consciousness also means you are excluded from certain experiences and places. The plane of dreams, where mortal consciousness travels during sleep, is closed to you. You cannot dream because you cannot sleep. And based on everything documented about planar travel and consciousness, you cannot access the dreamscape through any other means. Your consciousness, bound to the phylactery and projected through your undead body, is locked firmly within the material plane. The dreams, visions, and impossible experiences that mortals access every night are forever beyond your reach. This is the undead condition. This is what you have become. Your consciousness continues unbroken, your awareness never dimming, your perception never ceasing. You are powerful beyond mortal measure. You are immortal beyond mortal comprehension, and you are utterly, completely, irrevocably removed from the rhythms that once defined your existence. You will never sleep again. The biological imperative is gone. The magical gateway to dreams is closed. The blessed darkness of unconsciousness is denied to you forever. You are awake. You will always be awake. This is your power. This is your curse. This is the reality of undeath for the Lich Queen who stands in her tower, conscious and aware, surveying the centuries that stretch ahead like an endless road with no rest stops, no inns, no places to lay down the burden of awareness. She is eternal. She is vigilant. She is trapped within consciousness that knows no mercy, no relief, no end. The practical implications of sleepless existence manifest most clearly in the daily practice of magic. You are a Lich, and that almost certainly means you were a wizard or sorcerer of tremendous power before your transformation. Magic is not merely your weapon or tool. Magic is your purpose, your obsession, the reason you chose immortality in the first place. You sought to transcend death so you could continue accumulating arcane knowledge without the interruption of mortality. But the methods by which you access and utilize magic have changed in ways both subtle and profound. In your mortal life, the routine was familiar and comfortable. You would spend your day adventuring, researching, experimenting, or pursuing whatever goals occupied your attention. Throughout this time, you would cast spells as needed, drawing upon the prepared magic you had readied that morning. Each spell cast would expend the magical potential you had stored in your mind, emptying that particular mental container. By evening, your spells would be largely or completely expended, and you would feel the weight of the day upon you. You would eat a meal, perhaps read for an hour, then retire to your bedchamber for the night. Sleep would come easily after a full day of magical exertion. You would drift into unconsciousness, and your mind would process the experiences of the day while your body restored itself. After 7 or 8 hours, you would wake naturally, feeling refreshed and ready to begin again. You would rise, wash, eat a light breakfast, then settle into your study for the morning's most important work. Opening your spellbook, you would spend approximately 1 hour reviewing the spells you wished to prepare for the coming day. Your mind, refreshed by sleep, would easily absorb the complex patterns and formulas. By the end of the hour, you would have a full complement of prepared spells, ready to be cast as needed. This was the rhythm of a wizard's life, a comfortable cycle of exertion and rest, use and restoration. Now, as a Lich, the cycle has been disrupted in fundamental ways. You still cast spells throughout your activities. You still expend the magical potential stored in your consciousness, but the restoration phase operates under entirely different principles. You do not grow tired. After a full day of casting spells and exhausting your prepared magic, you feel no weariness, no need for rest. Your undead body is incapable of fatigue. You could, theoretically, simply continue your activities indefinitely, pursuing research or schemes without pause. But you cannot prepare new spells without first undergoing a period of focused meditation. This is not optional. This is not a limitation you can overcome through force of will or superior magical skill. The weave itself, the fundamental network of magical energy that permeates all reality, requires this period of rest before it will allow you to prepare spells again. The exact mechanism is debated among magical scholars, but the result is absolute. A spellcaster who has expended their prepared spells must complete a rest period before they can prepare new spells, regardless of whether that spellcaster is living or undead. For you, as a Lich, this rest period takes the form of a meditative trance lasting 1 to 2 hours. During this trance, you remain completely aware of your surroundings. Your magical senses continue to function normally. You perceive everything happening around you with perfect clarity, but your attention turns primarily inward, focusing on your connection to the weave and the restoration of your magical capabilities. This is not sleep. This is not even similar to sleep. This is a conscious, deliberate focusing of will and perception toward a specific magical goal. The experience resembles deep meditation more than rest. Imagine sitting perfectly still, your consciousness entirely focused on the patterns of magical energy that flow through and around you. You perceive the weave directly, seeing the threads of possibility and power that connect all things. You observe how your spell casting throughout the previous hours has depleted certain pathways, created temporary blockages in others, and generally disrupted the smooth flow of arcane energy through your consciousness. During the trance, you allow these disruptions to settle, the pathways to clear, the energy to flow naturally again. By the end of the 1 to 2 hour period, your connection to the weave has been restored, and you are ready to prepare new spells. The process of spell preparation itself remains largely unchanged from your mortal days. After completing your meditative trance, you retrieve your spellbook and spend approximately 1 hour studying the spells you wish to prepare. You read the notations you have written, review the complex formulas and diagrams, trace the patterns in your mind. Each spell is a separate mental construction, a framework of intention and energy that you build within your consciousness. Once built, the spell waits there, ready to be released with a final trigger of words, gestures, and will. The key difference is what comes before the preparation. A living wizard sleeps for 8 hours, then prepares spells for 1 hour, for a total of 9 hours between the exhaustion of old spells and the readiness of new ones. You, as a Lich, meditate for 1 to 2 hours, then prepare spells for 1 hour, for a total of 2 to 3 hours. This might seem like a significant advantage, and in some ways it is. You can cycle through your magical capabilities much more quickly than a living wizard can. If circumstances demand it, you can cast all your spells, meditate briefly, prepare new spells, and cast again within a few hours rather than waiting until the next day. But this efficiency comes with hidden costs. The living wizard who sleeps for 8 hours experiences more than just magical restoration. They experience psychological relief. They experience the processing of experiences and emotions. They experience the boundary between one day and the next, the sense of completion and renewal that comes with each sleep cycle. When they wake and prepare spells, they are not only magically restored, but mentally refreshed, ready to engage with the world with renewed perspective and energy. You have none of this. You meditate for 2 hours, prepare spells for 1 hour, and then you continue. But you are not renewed. You are not refreshed. You are simply ready to cast spells again. The continuous nature of your consciousness means there is no sense of completion, no psychological boundary between periods of activity. Based on the documented behaviors of liches across the ages, their tendency to lose track of time. Their difficulty distinguishing between recent and distant events. This lack of natural boundaries appears to create significant cognitive challenges. Yesterday flows into today, flows into tomorrow, without any clear demarcation. After a week, you might struggle to remember which day a particular event occurred, because all the days blend together in your memory. After a year, individual days become almost indistinguishable. After a century, entire decades might blur into a vague sense of continuous activity without clear structure or separation. The meditative trance also cannot provide the deeper benefits that sleep offers to living beings. During sleep, the mortal mind processes trauma, integrates difficult experiences, and maintains psychological stability. Dreams, even nightmares, serve as release valves for emotional pressure, allowing the mind to process fear and stress in symbolic rather than literal forms. The sleeping brain reorganizes memories, discarding trivial details while strengthening important connections. All of these processes occur automatically, without conscious effort or awareness. Your meditative trance does none of this. It is purely focused on magical restoration. Your consciousness remains active and aware throughout the process, which means you do not receive any of the unconscious mental processing that sleep provides. Traumatic experiences remain unprocessed. Difficult emotions remain unintegrated. Your memory continues accumulating details without the natural pruning that sleep provides. Over time, this could create a form of psychological burden that no living being ever experiences. You remember everything, process nothing unconsciously, and have no natural mechanism for mental restoration beyond conscious effort. This leads to behaviors that the lore describes as characteristic of liches. They become obsessive, focusing on particular areas of study or schemes with intensity that borders on madness. This is not mere personality quirk. This appears to be the natural result of consciousness that cannot rest. When you find something that captures your attention, you can pursue it without interruption for days, weeks, months, or even years. There is no biological need forcing you to stop. There is no sleep pulling you away from your work. You simply continue. And the continuous nature of your focus creates patterns of thought that become deeper and more rigid over time. Many liches develop elaborate rituals and routines to impose structure on their existence. Without the natural rhythm of sleeping and waking, you must create artificial boundaries and markers to maintain any sense of temporal organization. You might decide to meditate and prepare spells at the same time each day, even though you do not technically need to. You might establish regular times for research, experimentation, and other activities, creating a schedule that mimics the daily rhythm you once experienced as a mortal. These routines serve no magical purpose. They serve a psychological purpose, providing structure and predictability in an existence that otherwise has no natural structure at all. The nature of arcane rest also affects how you relate to other spellcasters. Living wizards understand the vulnerability of sleep. They know that during those 8 hours of unconsciousness, they are helpless. They cannot defend themselves effectively. They cannot cast spells. They must trust in guards, wards, and secure locations to protect them during this period of weakness. This shared vulnerability creates a common understanding among mortal wizards. They respect the need for rest because they share the need themselves. You have no such vulnerability. You are never unconscious. You are never helpless in the way that sleeping creatures are helpless. Your meditative trance leaves you fully aware and capable of responding to threats. This gives you a significant tactical advantage over living opponents. An adventuring party that attacks your lair might plan their assault for night, expecting to find you sleeping. Instead, they find you fully alert, aware of their approach, and ready to defend yourself with all your considerable power. But this advantage also contributes to your isolation. You do not understand the vulnerability of sleep anymore. You have forgotten what it feels like to need rest, to crave the relief of unconsciousness. When you interact with living beings, this fundamental difference creates a gulf of comprehension. They need things you do not need. They experience weaknesses you do not experience. You can intellectually remember what sleep was like, but the felt sense of it, the visceral understanding of what it means to be tired and to need rest, fades from your consciousness over decades and centuries of undeath. The connection between rest and magic also reveals something profound about the nature of the weave itself. The weave recognizes the necessity of rest, even for undead beings. The magical structure of reality demands this period of restoration before allowing spell preparation. This suggests that rest is not merely biological. Rest is metaphysical, woven into the fundamental laws that govern magic. Even a being that has transcended biology, that has removed itself from the natural cycles of life and death, cannot escape this requirement. The weave demands rest, and so you must provide it, even if your undead nature means that rest is a pale shadow of what it once was. Some liches experiment with alternative approaches to spell preparation, seeking ways to circumvent or modify the standard requirements. The lore contains references to liches who have developed unique meditation techniques, who have created magical items that facilitate spell preparation, or who have negotiated pacts with powerful entities to alter how they access arcane power. These experiments sometimes succeed in minor ways, perhaps reducing the meditation time required or allowing certain spells to be prepared more quickly. But the fundamental requirement cannot be eliminated. Magic demands rest, even from those who can never truly rest. In the end, the practice of magic as a lich reveals the central paradox of your existence. You chose undeath to continue your magical research without the interruption of mortality. You wanted infinite time to study, learn, and accumulate power. You achieved this goal. You have all the time in the world, literally infinite time stretching ahead of you. But the quality of that time is fundamentally different from what you experienced as a mortal. You can prepare spells more quickly, yes. You can continue your research without biological interruption, yes, but you have lost the natural rhythm of activity and rest, the psychological renewal that comes with each sleep cycle, and the unconscious processing that maintains mental health and stability. You stand in your laboratory, surrounded by centuries of accumulated knowledge. You have just completed your meditative trance and prepared your spells for the day. Though calling it a day feels increasingly arbitrary when all your days blend together without clear beginning or end. You are ready to continue your research, to pursue your schemes, to cast your spells as needed. You are powerful, you are prepared, you are capable, but you are not rested. You can never be rested, and as the centuries accumulate behind you and the millennia stretch ahead, this distinction becomes less academic and more fundamental to your entire existence. The Lich Queen is powerful beyond measure, yes, but she is also tired in ways that transcend fatigue, burdened in ways that no amount of meditation can relieve, and trapped within an awareness that continues unbroken across ages, without the mercy of sleep to provide respite from the weight of eternal consciousness. Time changes when you never sleep. This is not obvious at first. In those early days and weeks after your transformation, when the novelty of undeath still occupies your attention, you are powerful now, immortal now, freed from the limitations of mortal flesh. You pursue your research with renewed vigor, casting spells without tiring, reading through the night without need for rest. The hours pass quickly because every hour is filled with purpose and activity. You might not even notice the absence of sleep because you are too busy experiencing everything else that Lichdom has granted you. But time is relentless, and eventually the novelty fades. Months pass, then years, then decades. The research that once excited you becomes routine. The spells you cast become familiar patterns, executed without conscious thought. The schemes you orchestrate play out over periods so long that individual events lose their distinctiveness. And slowly, gradually, based on the observable changes in Lich behavior over time, you begin to understand what you have sacrificed, not just the ability to sleep, but everything that sleep represented. The boundaries, the renewal, the mercy of unconsciousness that breaks up the continuous stream of awareness and makes existence tolerable. For a living being, each day is a discrete unit. You wake in the morning and the day begins. You move through the hours, experiencing events and encounters. Evening comes, bringing weariness. You eat, you prepare for rest, you lie down, and you sleep. When you wake the next morning, yesterday is complete. It is finished, processed, filed away into memory as a distinct unit. Today is new, fresh, separate from what came before. This daily cycle provides psychological structure that is so fundamental most mortals never consciously recognize it. Days become weeks, weeks become months, months become years, and each unit is distinct, memorable, bounded by the experience of sleeping and waking. You have none of this. You meditate occasionally to restore your magical capabilities. Yes, but this does not create the same psychological boundary that sleep provides. When you emerge from your 2-hour trance and prepare your spells, you are continuing the same unbroken thread of consciousness that has persisted since your transformation. There is no sense of renewal, no feeling of starting fresh. Yesterday does not end. It simply continues into today, which continues into tomorrow, which continues into next week, next month, next year. The stream of consciousness is unbroken, and without natural boundaries, time begins to lose its structure. Scholars who have studied undead spellcasters from a distance have noted certain characteristic behaviors that suggest temporal disorientation. Liches become obsessed with record keeping, maintaining detailed journals that document not just their research, but mundane daily activities. This compulsive documentation is not mere eccentricity. It appears to be a desperate attempt to impose external structure on an existence that has no internal structure. You write everything down because your natural memory, lacking the organizational framework that sleep provides, cannot reliably track temporal sequences across decades and centuries. After the first year, you might notice that you have difficulty remembering exactly when certain events occurred. Was it 3 months ago or 4? The memories are clear, but their temporal placement is fuzzy. After a decade, entire years begin to blur together. You remember conducting certain experiments, reading certain books, casting certain spells, but you cannot confidently place these activities within specific time periods. After a century, the problem becomes severe. Decades blend into indistinct periods. Events that occurred 40 years ago feel no more distant than events from last week, because all of it exists in the same continuous stream of memory, without natural separation points. This temporal confusion is one of the first psychological symptoms that manifests in documented cases of prolonged undeath. Living beings mark time through the rhythm of sleeping and waking. You sleep approximately 365 times per year. Each sleep marks a boundary, a transition point, a moment of discontinuity in consciousness. These boundaries act as natural bookmarks in memory, helping you organize experiences into discrete periods. Remove these boundaries, and time collapses into a continuous flow without clear structure. The weight of continuous consciousness extends beyond temporal confusion. Every experience you have, every thought you think, every emotion you feel accumulates in your mind without any natural processing or integration. Living beings process experiences during sleep, particularly during the dreaming phase. The sleeping brain takes the raw material of daily life and works with it, finding patterns, making connections, resolving emotional tensions, and integrating new information into existing frameworks. Much of this processing occurs entirely outside conscious awareness. You simply wake up and find that problems have solved themselves, that difficult emotions have softened, that experiences have been integrated into your understanding of the world. For you, as a Lich, none of this occurs automatically. Every experience remains raw and unprocessed unless you consciously choose to work with it, based on accounts from those who have interacted extensively with ancient liches. A traumatic event from a century ago can provoke the same immediate emotional reaction as something recent, because there has been no unconscious processing to soften its edges or integrate it into a broader narrative. An argument with an associate from decades past can still trigger intense emotion because the emotion has never been metabolized through the dream process. Your consciousness accumulates everything like a vessel that never empties, filling slowly but inexorably with the unprocessed material of existence. The emotional consequences of this accumulation appear profound and often destructive in documented cases. Living beings have natural mechanisms for emotional regulation. Sleep plays a critical role in this regulation, providing time and space for the nervous system to return to baseline after periods of stress or excitement. Dreams allow for the symbolic processing of difficult emotions, transforming literal fears into metaphorical encounters that can be experienced and resolved at a safe distance. The morning after a terrible day often brings improved emotional state simply because sleep has provided 8 hours of unconscious emotional processing. You have no such mechanism. If you experience fear, the fear remains until you consciously work through it. If you experience anger, the anger persists without natural diminishment. If you experience grief, the grief stays fresh and immediate across years or decades. Historical accounts suggest that some liches respond to this by suppressing emotions entirely, adopting a cold rationality that protects them from the accumulating weight of unprocessed feelings. Others become increasingly volatile, their emotional responses magnified and distorted by centuries of accumulation without relief. Still, others cycle between emotional extremes, experiencing long periods of frozen numbness interrupted by explosions of feeling that overwhelm their careful control. The lore describes liches as often being mad, their behavior erratic and unpredictable. This madness is not simply the result of evil or moral corruption. Based on what we know about consciousness and the functions of sleep, it appears to be the natural psychological consequence of consciousness that never rests. The mortal mind is not designed to operate continuously across centuries without the restorative cycles of sleep. Remove those cycles, and the mind begins to deteriorate in ways both subtle and severe. Memory becomes unreliable. Emotional regulation fails. Thought patterns become rigid and obsessive. The personality that once animated the living wizard gradually distorts into something strange and terrible. Isolation compounds these psychological burdens. As a Lich, you are fundamentally separated from the living world. You do not eat, so you do not share meals with others. You do not sleep, so you do not share the vulnerability and intimacy that sleeping near others creates. You do not experience the physical pleasures that bind living beings together. Over time, this isolation erodes your ability to understand or relate to mortal concerns. You remember intellectually what it was like to be mortal, but the felt sense of mortality fades. You become alien to the living, and they become alien to you. This alienation extends to other liches as well. You might assume that undead spellcasters would form alliances or partnerships based on their shared condition. Sometimes this occurs, but more often liches are solitary beings who view other liches as competitors or threats. Each Lich is pursuing their own incomprehensible research, orchestrating their own centuries-long schemes, obsessing over their own particular fixations. The lack of sleep means you have no reason to seek out others for protection during vulnerable hours. The continuous nature of consciousness means you have no natural rhythm that might synchronize with another being's rhythm. You are alone because your existence operates on a temporal and psychological scale that makes genuine connection almost impossible. The weight of eternal wakefulness also manifests in how you perceive and experience the present moment. Living beings move through time with a natural rhythm of attention. You focus intently on what is happening now during waking hours, then release that focus during sleep. This rhythm creates a sense of presence, of being genuinely engaged with the current moment. But when consciousness never rests, the present moment begins to feel less significant. What is happening now is simply one more thing in an endless series of things, none of which feel truly distinct from any other. The intensity of presence that living beings experience fades into a kind of constant, diminished awareness, where nothing feels particularly important or real. This phenomenon appears in the recorded behavior of ancient liches. The older a Lich becomes, the less they seem to care about immediate events. A Lich who has existed for 1,000 years might barely acknowledge intruders in their lair, continuing their research as adventurers prepare to attack. This is not confidence or contempt, though it might appear that way. This could represent the natural result of consciousness that has experienced so many present moments that the current one holds no special significance. You have been interrupted 10,000 times before. You have fought off intruders 1,000 times. You have prepared your defensive spells so many times the process is automatic. The present moment is not new or interesting. It is just another repetition in an endless series of repetitions. The psychological weight also affects your motivation and drive. In your mortal life, you were motivated partly by the knowledge of limited time. You had perhaps a century at most to accomplish your goals, learn what you wanted to learn, achieve what you wanted to achieve. This urgency drove you forward, giving purpose and intensity to your efforts. As a Lich, that urgency is gone. You have infinite time. There is no deadline. There is no rush. You can spend a century on a single line of research because you will have another century after that, and another after that, forever. This infinite time paradoxically leads to a kind of paralysis or meaninglessness. When everything can be accomplished eventually, nothing feels particularly important to accomplish now. Some liches respond to this by creating artificial urgency through schemes and plots. You orchestrate elaborate plans that will take decades or centuries to complete, giving yourself goals and milestones that create a sense of purpose and progression. But these are games you play with yourself, because the underlying reality is that nothing truly matters when you have eternity. Other liches sink into a kind of active nihilism, pursuing power and knowledge, not because these things have value, but simply because pursuit is better than the alternative of acknowledging the emptiness at the center of immortal existence. The weight is heaviest in the quiet moments. You stand in your sanctum, your research complete for the moment, your schemes progressing on their own. No immediate demands on your attention. A living being in this situation might feel contentment, satisfaction, perhaps even boredom. But boredom implies the possibility of change, the arrival of something new to relieve the monotony. You know that nothing truly new will arrive. You have existed for centuries. You have seen patterns repeat endlessly. You understand that whatever happens next will simply be a variation on something you have already experienced 1,000 times before. In these quiet moments, you might experience something that living beings rarely encounter. A kind of existential weight that comes from being truly unable to escape yourself. A living person who feels burdened by consciousness can sleep, can dream, can experience the daily mercy of unconscious hours where the self dissolves and reforms. You have no such escape. You are trapped inside your own awareness, and that awareness continues uninterrupted across centuries, and there is no relief, no respite, no rest. This is perhaps the deepest level of the dilemma, not just that you cannot sleep, but that you are imprisoned within consciousness that never stops, experiencing your own existence without pause or mercy, aware of every moment in an existence that stretches toward infinity. The Lich Queen stands in her tower. She has stood there in one form or another for 500 years. She will stand there for 500 more, and 500 after that, and on until something finally destroys her phylactery and releases her soul from its prison. She is powerful. She is immortal. She is knowledgeable beyond mortal comprehension. And based on everything we can infer from the nature of sleepless existence, she is tired in ways that transcend fatigue, burdened by the accumulated weight of half a millennium without sleep, without dreams, without the blessed darkness that makes existence tolerable. She cannot rest. She will never rest. This is her power. This is her curse. This is the psychological reality of eternal wakefulness, and it is a weight that grows heavier with every passing century. the theoretical exploration of lichdom takes on new dimensions when you examine specific individuals who have walked this path. Throughout the history of the Forgotten Realms and the broader multiverse of Dungeons and Dragons, certain Lich queens stand as examples of what this existence actually means when lived, rather than merely contemplated. Their stories reveal the practical reality of undeath, the choices they made to cope with eternal wakefulness, and the prices they paid for immortality. The most prominent Lich queen in the lore is Vlaakith, ruler of the Githyanki people. Her story spans multiple incarnations, but the most significant is Vlaakith 157, who rules as both queen and Lich. Understanding her requires first understanding the githyanki themselves and the unique cultural context that produced her reign. The Githyanki are a race born from slavery and rebellion millennia ago. They and their cousins, the Githzerai, were a single people called the Gith, who existed as thralls to the mind flayers, those terrible aberrations who feed on brains and use psychic powers to dominate other species. The Gith were enslaved for so long that their original nature was lost, their current form shaped by generations of breeding and modification by their mind flayer masters. But eventually, a leader arose. Gith herself, whose name would define her people, led a rebellion that shattered the mind flayer empire and freed her people from bondage. After the rebellion, the freed people split into two factions. The Githzerai, led by Zerthaman, believed in contemplation, discipline, and establishing a new homeland where they could develop their own culture in peace. The Githyanki, led by Gith herself, believed in eternal war, seeking to conquer the plains and ensure through strength that they would never be enslaved again. This philosophical split became a physical and cultural division. The Githzerai retreated to the plane of limbo, creating fortresses within that chaotic realm. The Githyanki claimed the astral plane as their home, establishing cities and fortresses throughout that timeless expanse. Gith herself eventually departed on a mission to the Nine Hells, seeking an alliance with the archdevil Tiamat. She left her most trusted lieutenant, Vlaakith, in command. Gith never returned. The circumstances of her disappearance remain shrouded in mystery and conspiracy. Some accounts suggest that the first Vlaakith betrayed Gith, trading her to Tiamat in exchange for the pact that would give the Githyanki their red dragon mounts. Others claim Gith was imprisoned rather than killed. Regardless of the truth, the result was clear. Vlaakith declared herself queen and began a dynasty that would span millennia. For many generations, this succession continued through a line of queens. The title of Vlaakith became hereditary, passed down through the royal bloodline. Each new queen took the name Vlaakith along with a number indicating her place in the succession. Vlaakith II, Vlaakith III, and onward through the centuries, each ruling until death before passing the throne to her designated heir. The Githyanki accepted this system, viewing the Vlaakith line as the legitimate continuation of Gith's own authority. But approximately 1,000 years before the current era, something changed. Vlaakith 156 died, and her heir took the throne as Vlaakith 157. The exact circumstances of this queen's transformation into a Lich remain somewhat obscure in the historical record. What is documented clearly is that she achieved Lichdom and has maintained her rule for approximately 1,000 years, far longer than any natural lifespan would allow. This new queen was ambitious, powerful, and determined never to surrender her throne to the inevitability of death. The transformation granted her immortality, but it also created a unique problem. The Githyanki people expected each Vlaakith to eventually die and pass the throne to the next generation. Vlaakith 157 had no intention of dying or relinquishing power, whether she openly revealed her undead nature to her people or maintained elaborate deceptions to hide it varies in different accounts. What is consistently documented is that she ruled from Tunnerath, the Githyanki capital city built upon the corpse of a dead god floating in the astral plane, and her people came to accept her extraordinary longevity through various explanations. She wore the crown of corruption upon her head, a powerful artifact, and wielded the ruby-encrusted scepter of Ephelamen, symbols of her authority and tools of her power. Over the centuries, she aged slowly, then used magic to rejuvenate her appearance when necessary. Her people accepted her endurance as a consequence of dwelling in the timeless astral plane, or as blessings from their draconic allies. But the sleeplessness of undeath created challenges, even for a queen who commanded legions. Vlaakith 157 never rested. She was always present, always aware, always watching over her domain with consciousness that never dimmed. This constant vigilance gave her significant advantages. No conspiracy could be plotted without risk of her discovering it through her extensive spy networks and magical surveillance. No invasion could be launched without her immediate knowledge. She was the eternal, unwavering center of Githyanki power, always present, always in control. But over centuries of sleepless existence, observable patterns emerged in her rule. She became increasingly paranoid and controlling. The Githyanki tradition held that powerful warriors and spellcasters among her people represented the future strength of their race. A mortal queen might take pride in such powerful subjects, knowing they would continue Githyanki dominance after her death. An undead queen who planned to reign forever saw them differently. She developed a solution that was both elegant and monstrous. When Githyanki adventurers reached sufficient power, typically around level 15 or 16, she would summon them to her throne room for what she called ascension. She told them they would be elevated to a higher form of existence, joining the eternal ranks of her most trusted servants. The reality, well documented in multiple sources, was darker. She used powerful magic to trap their souls, then consumed those souls to fuel her own lichdom and extend her power. This practice continued for centuries, Hidden behind the language of honor and ascension, Githyanki warriors and spellcasters saw being summoned to the Queen as the highest achievement of their lives, never knowing they were walking into their own execution and soul annihilation. Some she transformed into undead servitors called the loreDND and the Vlaakith, creating a Praetorian guard of unique undead who served her with absolute loyalty. The practice allowed Vlaakith to maintain her lichdom without needing to hunt for souls from other sources. But it also meant she was consuming the very people she claimed to lead and protect. The irony was profound and terrible. She sought immortality to eternally rule and protect her people, ensuring they would have strong, continuous leadership in their eternal war against the mind flayers and other enemies. But maintaining that immortality required her to regularly murder the strongest and most promising members of her own race. She created a ceiling on githyanki power. No githyanki could ever surpass her or even approach her might, because she killed anyone who came close. This ensured her security, but also ensured that the githyanki as a whole could never reach their full potential while she ruled. The sleeplessness contributed significantly to her ability to maintain both her rule and her deceptions. She never let her guard down, never entered a vulnerable state where conspirators might move against her, or where her undead nature might be discovered. She was always vigilant, always ready, always in perfect control of her appearance and demeanor. Her palace, Susurrus, became a place steeped in death and agony, where she had tortured and killed thousands over the centuries. According to accounts, the souls of her victims remained trapped within the palace, creating an endless chorus of whispers that she found soothing rather than disturbing. But this constant control also meant she experienced the full weight of her actions without the mercy of unconsciousness to provide even temporary escape. Every soul she consumed, every loyal warrior she murdered, every act of betrayal against her own people remained in her consciousness. Based on what we understand about memory and consciousness without sleep, these experiences would accumulate unprocessed and immediate across 1,000 years. The paranoia that drove her to consume her strongest subjects appears to have been fed by the sleepless nature of her existence. She had infinite time to imagine threats, to analyze every interaction for hidden meanings, to see conspiracy in every shadow. Vlaakith's undeath also affected her relationship with Tiamat, the Dragon Queen. The original pact between the githyanki and the Red Dragons had been brokered through Tiamat's influence. Vlaakith 157 maintained this relationship, ensuring that Red Dragons continued to serve as mounts and allies to her people. Whether Tiamat knew her vassal queen was a Lich remains unclear in the sources, but given Tiamat's divine nature and power, it seems reasonable to infer she knew and chose not to interfere as long as the tribute and service continued. This created another layer of complexity in Vlaakith's existence, deceiving her people about her nature, while possibly being known and tolerated by her divine patron. The eternal wakefulness also manifested in Vlaakith's governance style. She became obsessed with control to a degree that would be impossible for a mortal ruler to sustain. She established spy networks that monitored every githyanki city and warband. She created magical systems for tracking the location and activities of her most powerful subjects. She personally reviewed reports and intelligence with a thoroughness that would be impossible for a ruler who needed to sleep 8 hours each day. This might appear as exemplary dedication, but it also suggests the paranoia and obsession that eternal consciousness breeds. She could not let go. She could not delegate fully. She could not trust. And she had centuries of sleepless hours to imagine every possible betrayal. Her ultimate ambition extended beyond merely maintaining her rule. Vlaakith 157 sought to achieve true godhood, to ascend from Lich to deity. This drove her to even more extreme measures. She cast thousands of wish spells, using them to draw power from the divine corpse upon which Tunnerath was built, attempting to siphon divine essence for herself. Her soul-devouring practices served not only to maintain her lichdom, but to accumulate the vast magical power necessary for this ascension. She forbade any deity worship among her people besides worship of herself, creating a cult of personality where she was revered, though never openly called a goddess. The sleepless centuries also affected how she perceived time and priority. A living ruler must make decisions within the constraints of a limited lifespan, creating urgency and focus. Vlaakith had no such constraints. She could pursue her goal of godhood across millennia, taking centuries to accumulate the necessary power and knowledge. This infinite time frame, paradoxically, made her more cautious in some ways and more reckless in others. She could afford to wait centuries for the right moment to act, but she also became willing to commit atrocities that would horrify any mortal ruler, because the long-term consequences seemed manageable when you had eternity to deal with them. Her rule created a unique form of stagnation among the githyanki. With an immortal queen who never allowed succession, there could be no natural renewal of leadership, no fresh perspectives, no evolution of governance. The githyanki society became frozen around Vlaakith's particular obsessions and paranoias. Her sleepless vigilance meant she was involved in every significant decision, creating a bottleneck where nothing could change without her direct approval. The very immortality that was supposed to provide stability instead created a kind of death for githyanki culture itself, unable to grow or evolve, because the same consciousness had controlled it without break for 1,000 years. Other Lich queens exist in the lore of the Forgotten Realms, though none achieve quite the prominence or power of Vlaakith 157. The Cult of the Dragon, an organization dedicated to transforming dragons into Liches, has occasionally been led by female liches who pursue their own dark visions of draconic supremacy. Various evil wizards throughout Faerun's history have become liches, and among them, Several were women of tremendous magical power who chose undeath over mortality. Each faced the same fundamental dilemma that Vlaakith faced: the sleeplessness, the eternal wakefulness, the weight of consciousness that never rests across centuries or millennia. What makes Vlaakith particularly instructive as an example is the scope of her power and the length of her reign, 1,000 years of sleepless existence. 1,000 years of continuous consciousness, unbroken by dreams or rest. 1,000 years of ruling, plotting, consuming souls, and maintaining her position. The psychological toll of such an existence, while not directly documented, can be inferred from her increasingly paranoid and destructive behaviors. Over time, she is powerful beyond mortal measure, commanding magic that can reshape reality itself. She rules an entire race spread across the astral plane and beyond. She has achieved a form of immortality and security that most beings can only imagine. But she can never sleep. She can never dream. She can never experience that blessed darkness where consciousness fades and the burden of existence lifts, even temporarily. For 1,000 years, she has been awake, aware, vigilant, and alone in a way that no mortal mind can truly comprehend. Her power is absolute, but her existence, based on everything we can infer from the nature of undeath and consciousness, is a prison of eternal wakefulness. This is the reality of the Lich Queen, demonstrated not in theory, but in the lived experience of the most powerful example the Forgotten Realms has to offer. Vlaakith 157 stands as both triumph and warning, showing what can be achieved through lichdom and what must be sacrificed to achieve it. The absence of sleep necessarily means the absence of dreams, but the nature of what has been lost deserves deeper examination. Dreams are not merely entertainment for the sleeping mind, random neural firings that create strange narratives without purpose or meaning. In the cosmology of Dungeons and Dragons, dreams represent something far more significant. They are journeys to another plane of existence, connections to powers and entities beyond normal perception, and windows into possibilities that waking consciousness cannot access. When you became a Lich, you did not merely lose the ability to sleep. You lost access to an entire dimension of reality. The plane of dreams exists as a distinct realm within the multiverse, sometimes called the region of dreams or the dreamscape. According to planar scholars and those who have studied such phenomena, it overlays the material plane like a vast, shifting shadow, touching every location where sleeping creatures exist. The plane itself is not fixed or stable. It constantly changes, reshaping itself according to the collective unconscious of all dreaming beings. When a mortal sleeps and dreams, their consciousness actually travels to this plane, creating and experiencing landscapes built from their own memories, desires, fears, and imagination, mixed with the dreamscapes of countless other sleeping minds. This is not metaphor in the cosmological framework of the game. This is described as literal reality within the lore of the Forgotten Realms. When you dreamed as a mortal, you were actually visiting another plane of existence. The experience felt entirely real because, in a very important sense, it was real. You walked through impossible architecture, flew without wings, encountered people long dead, experienced events that violated every law of physics, and all of it occurred on the plane of dreams as genuine experience, not mere illusion generated by your sleeping brain. The plane operates under its own rules, distinct from the material plane, but no less valid within the game's cosmology. Distance and space function differently. Time moves strangely, with hours of dream experience sometimes occurring in minutes of sleep, or vice versa. The laws of physics are suggestions rather than absolutes. Gravity applies only if you believe it should. Walls are solid only if you perceive them as solid. The entire environment responds to consciousness and belief in ways that the material plane never does. This makes the plane of dreams both wondrous and dangerous, a realm where imagination has the power to shape reality directly. Many entities make their home on the plane of dreams, or use it for their own purposes. Night hags, those fiendish creatures from the lower planes, travel through the dreams of mortals to feed on fear and suffering. They enter the dreamscape, find sleeping victims, and torment them with nightmares so terrible that the victim may die from sheer terror, their heart stopping as their dream self experiences death. Even deities sometimes communicate with their followers through dreams, sending visions and messages that arrive in the form of symbolic narratives played out on the dream plane. As a mortal wizard, you had access to all of this. Every night when you slept, you journeyed to the plane of dreams. Most of your dreams were mundane, personal experiences shaped by your own psyche processing the events of your day. But occasionally, you might have experienced something more, a vision sent by a deity, an encounter with another dreaming consciousness, a glimpse of some greater truth that your waking mind could not perceive. The plane of dreams was your birthright as a living, sleeping being, available to you every night of your mortal life. Now, as a Lich, you are completely cut off from this realm. The plane of dreams is accessible only to sleeping consciousness, and you cannot sleep. Your consciousness is locked firmly within the material plane, bound to your phylactery, and projected through your undead body. You can travel to other planes through spells like plane shift or gate, but the plane of dreams specifically excludes you. Based on everything documented about planar travel and the nature of dreams, it is not a matter of knowing the right spell or finding the correct portal. It is a fundamental incompatibility between your undead nature and the nature of the dream realm itself. Dreams require sleep, and sleep requires life, and you have neither. This exclusion represents a profound loss of magical and mystical possibility. Many forms of divination and prophecy work through dreams. Prophetic visions arrive during sleep, providing glimpses of possible futures or hidden truths. As a Lich, You have no access to this channel of information. Gods and powerful entities who might wish to communicate with you through dreams cannot reach you. You must rely solely on waking consciousness and the magical divination spells you can cast, which, while powerful, lack the symbolic depth and intuitive insight that dream visions provide. The question naturally arises whether liches ever experience anything resembling dreams during their meditative trances. Based on the documented mechanics of lichdom, the answer appears to be no. The meditative state required for spell preparation is entirely conscious and focused. Your awareness remains sharp and clear throughout the process. You perceive your surroundings normally. You can respond to threats or interruptions immediately. There is no dimming of consciousness, no descent into symbolic landscapes, no encounter with the strange logic and imagery that characterizes dreams. You are simply meditating, a focused waking state rather than an altered state of consciousness. Some accounts suggest that liches report experiencing what might be called visions, but these appear fundamentally different from dreams. These visions typically come through the phylactery connection, that magical link between your imprisoned soul and your undead body. The phylactery exists as a repository of your essence, holding your soul in a state of suspended animation outside your physical form. Occasionally, this could create unusual perceptual experiences. You might suddenly perceive the location where your phylactery is hidden, seeing through senses that have nothing to do with eyes or physical perception. You might experience memories with unusual vividness, as if your soul within the phylactery is reviewing its own history. You might perceive threats to the phylactery directly, feeling danger even if the phylactery is hidden on another plane entirely. These phylactery visions, if they occur, are not dreams. They would be direct perceptions mediated through your unique, undead nature. They would arrive while you are fully conscious and aware, interrupting your normal activities rather than occurring during a separate state of rest. They would lack the symbolic, narrative quality of dreams. There is no metaphor, no transformation of literal concerns into dream imagery. Instead, you would simply perceive something directly through the phylactery connection, a form of magical clairvoyance built into the fundamental structure of lichdom. Some ancient liches might develop the ability to induce trance states that approximate dreaming, but these would be conscious constructs rather than genuine dreams. You might sit in meditation and deliberately imagine landscapes, narratives, and experiences, creating a form of guided daydream. With sufficient focus and magical enhancement, these imagined experiences can become quite vivid, approaching the intensity of genuine dreams. But they lack the essential quality that makes dreams meaningful. Dreams arise from the unconscious, processing experiences and emotions without conscious direction or control. Your constructed trance visions would be entirely conscious creations, shaped by your will, and containing only what you deliberately put into them. They cannot surprise you. They cannot reveal hidden truths. they cannot provide the psychological processing and integration that genuine dreams offer. The exclusion from dreams also means you cannot be affected by dream-based magic in the normal way. Spells like Dream, which allows a caster to enter another creature's dreams and communicate with them, simply fail when targeted at a Lich. You do not dream, therefore there are no dreams to enter. This provides a certain protection against dream-based attacks and manipulation. But it also means you cannot be contacted or warned through dreams by allies or entities who might wish to help you. You are isolated from an entire dimension of magical communication. Nightmares, as they are commonly understood, also no longer affect you. A living being experiences nightmares as disturbing dreams that arise from fear, trauma, or psychological distress. These nightmares serve a function, allowing the sleeping mind to confront and process difficult emotions in symbolic form. The nightmares may be unpleasant, but they contribute to psychological health by providing a safe space for the mind to work through fears and anxieties. Without sleep and without dreams, you cannot have nightmares in this sense. Your fears and anxieties remain unprocessed, accumulating in your conscious mind without the release valve that nightmares provide. However, there are entities called nightmares that exist independently of the dream experience. These are actual creatures, often fiendish horses of flame and shadow, or they are supernatural manifestations of fear given independent existence. These nightmare entities can still affect you because they operate in the waking world as physical or semi-physical beings. A nightmare that manifests as a flaming horse can still attack you, stomp you, breathe smoke, and fire at you. But the psychological dimension of nightmares, the fear that arises from within the dreaming mind, is closed to you completely. The lore occasionally mentions liches who become obsessed with dreams precisely because they can no longer experience them. You might dedicate centuries to studying the plane of dreams from the outside, interviewing mortals about their dreams, collecting dream journals, attempting to understand through pure intellectual analysis what you can no longer experience directly. This obsession reveals the depth of what has been lost. Dreams represented not just entertainment or rest, but a form of consciousness fundamentally different from waking awareness. You have been reduced to a single mode of experience, unable to access the altered states and different perspectives that dreams once provided. Some liches might attempt magical experiments to regain access to dreams. You might create artificial dream realms using illusion and enchantment magic, building elaborate mental constructs that simulate the experience of dreaming. You might use spells like Modify Memory on yourself, implanting false memories of dreams in an attempt to recreate what has been lost. You might even attempt to magically induce temporary pseudolife in your undead body, hoping that this brief animation might allow for genuine sleep and dreams. Based on the fundamental nature of undeath, these experiments would universally fail to recreate the authentic dream experience, because they cannot overcome the fundamental barrier. Dreams require sleep. Sleep requires life. And Lichdom has removed you from the cycle of life irrevocably. The absence of dreams also affects how you process and understand symbolism. Dreams communicate through symbols and metaphors, training the mind to think in non-literal terms and recognize deeper patterns beneath surface appearances. A lifetime of dreaming teaches mortals to see multiple layers of meaning, to understand that things often represent other things, to recognize that truth sometimes arrives clothed in symbol rather than stated directly. Without dreams for centuries or millennia, this symbolic literacy could gradually fade. You might become increasingly literal in your thinking, less able to grasp metaphor and allegory, more focused on direct, concrete reality. This cognitive shift could contribute to the rigid, obsessive thinking patterns that appear characteristic of ancient liches in documented accounts. The dream exclusion also means you cannot benefit from the creative insights that dreams provide. Many of the greatest discoveries and artistic works in mortal history are said to have arrived through dreams. A sleeping mind makes connections that waking consciousness misses, sees patterns that logical analysis overlooks, combines ideas in novel ways that generate genuine innovation. Without dreams, your creativity becomes more constrained, more dependent on conscious effort and systematic methodology. You can still be innovative through deliberate experimentation and research, but you have lost the spontaneous creative leaps that dreams facilitate. In the quiet hours of your existence, when your research is paused and your schemes are in motion and nothing demands immediate attention, you might find yourself thinking about dreams. You remember what it was like to wake from a particularly vivid dream, the images still fresh in your mind, the emotions still resonating in your chest. You remember prophetic dreams that warned of danger or guided important decisions. You remember beautiful dreams that provided respite from difficult waking circumstances. You remember nightmares that, while frightening, somehow left you feeling cleansed afterward, as if facing your fears in symbolic form had diminished their power. All of this is gone now. You have not dreamed in centuries. You will never dream again. The plane of dreams exists without you, reshaped every night by the collective unconscious of countless sleeping mortals, and you are excluded absolutely. Your consciousness continues unbroken, locked in waking awareness, experiencing reality through a single lens without variation or respite. This is another dimension of the Lich Queen's dilemma. She is powerful enough to reshape reality through magic, but she cannot access the dream realm. She has lived for centuries, but she has not dreamed in all that time. She is aware, conscious, and awake, and the strange, symbolic, transformative experiences of the dreaming mind are forever beyond her reach. The individual costs of lichdom might seem manageable when considered separately. You cannot sleep, but you do not grow tired. You cannot dream, but you have magical visions through your phylactery. you experience continuous consciousness, but this allows unlimited time for research and planning. Each sacrifice, taken alone, appears to be a reasonable trade for immortality and power. But the costs do not remain separate. They accumulate, compound, and interact in ways that create burdens far greater than the sum of individual losses. Consider memory across centuries. A living human with a lifespan of 80 years accumulates 80 years of memories, organized and structured by approximately 29,200 sleep cycles, each one serving as a natural bookmark and processing point. The sleeping brain sorts memories each night, deciding what to keep, what to discard, what to strengthen, what to let fade. This automatic curation means that by the end of a mortal life, you retain the important experiences, while trivial details have been naturally forgotten. Your memory is a curated collection, not an exhaustive archive. As a Lich, you have no such curation. Every experience, every thought, every moment of your existence accumulates in your consciousness without automatic pruning. After 100 years, you have roughly 36,500 days of continuous memory without the organizing structure that sleep provides. After 500 years, 182,500 days. After 1,000 years, 365,000 days of uninterrupted experience, all existing in your consciousness without clear temporal organization or natural forgetting. The human mind, even enhanced by magical power and undead transformation, is not designed to hold this much unprocessed information. Based on observed Lich behaviors documented across centuries, memory appears to fail in strange ways. You might remember with perfect clarity a conversation from 400 years ago, but completely forget what you were doing yesterday. Events from different centuries blend together, creating false memories where you conflate multiple similar experiences into a single confused recollection. Faces and names become jumbled. You remember meeting someone, but cannot recall when or in what context. The sheer volume of accumulated experience becomes its own form of confusion, a weight that presses down on consciousness and makes clear thinking increasingly difficult. This memory degradation compounds with the emotional accumulation discussed earlier. You have centuries of unprocessed emotions layered upon centuries of degraded memories, creating a psychological structure that becomes increasingly unstable and unreliable. You might respond to a present situation based on emotions from 3 centuries ago, because the temporal separation between past and present has become meaningless in your continuous consciousness. You might fail to respond appropriately to a genuine threat because you have seen similar situations so many times that nothing feels urgent or important anymore. The isolation of Lichdom also accumulates into something more profound than mere loneliness. As a mortal, you were part of the community of living beings. You shared fundamental experiences with others. You all needed to eat, sleep, seek shelter, form relationships. These shared needs created common ground, a basis for understanding and connection. As a Lich, you have removed yourself from this community. You do not need what others need. You do not fear what others fear. You do not experience time as others experience it. The gulf between your existence and mortal existence widens with each passing century, until communication itself becomes nearly impossible. You might maintain relationships with mortal servants or associates, but these cannot be genuine partnerships. The power differential is too great. The difference in temporal perception is too profound. You exist on a scale of centuries, while they exist on a scale of decades. What they consider urgent, you see as trivial because you have witnessed similar situations dozens of times before. What you consider important, they cannot comprehend because they lack the extended time frame necessary to understand your long-term schemes. The relationship becomes that of a human trying to have a meaningful conversation with a mayfly. Two beings operating on such different scales that genuine understanding is impossible. Other liches might seem like potential companions, beings who share your condition and could understand your perspective. But lichdom tends to create beings who are fundamentally incompatible with each other. Each Lich becomes obsessed with their own particular research or schemes. Each develops their own idiosyncratic madness, shaped by centuries of sleepless existence. Each guards their phylactery with paranoid intensity, unable to trust anyone else with knowledge of their vulnerability. Two liches meeting are more likely to see potential threats or competitors than potential allies or friends. The shared condition of lichdom creates no bond because each Lich's experience of that condition has diverged in unique and incompatible directions. The requirement to periodically consume souls creates another cumulative burden. The first soul you feed to your phylactery might trouble you. The murder of an innocent being, the complete annihilation of their soul. These are acts that violate fundamental moral principles that most beings hold sacred, but you justify it. You need this to maintain your existence. You will use your immortality for important purposes that justify the cost. The cognitive dissonance is manageable for a single act, but then you do it again, and again, and again. After 100 years, you have consumed approximately 2 souls. After 500 years, 10 souls. After 1,000 years, 20 souls completely destroyed, 20 thinking, feeling beings murdered not just in body, but in spirit, denied any afterlife, obliterated from existence to fuel your continued undeath. The weight of these crimes accumulates. You might harden yourself, suppressing empathy and remorse to make the acts bearable. But the hardening itself is a cost, a loss of the emotional capacity that once made you fully conscious. Alternatively, you might retain your empathy, experiencing full guilt and horror for each murder, in which case the psychological burden becomes crushing across centuries of repeated atrocity. The physical degradation of your undead body also accumulates, though more slowly than psychological decay. Flesh withers and falls away. Bones become exposed. Your appearance becomes increasingly monstrous and inhuman. You might use illusion magic to hide this, presenting a human face to those you interact with, but you know what you truly look like. You perceive yourself through magical senses that see past illusions. The thing you have become, the animated corpse puppeted by a soul trapped in a distant object, confronts you every moment. The disconnection between what you once were and what you are now grows more obvious and disturbing with each passing century. Some liches embrace this transformation, adopting the aesthetic of death and decay as a form of power and identity. You might decorate your lair with bones and corpses, dress yourself in funeral garments, lean into the horror of your appearance as a tool for intimidation. But this embrace of monstrosity is itself a cost. You are abandoning your humanity, not just physically, but psychologically, choosing to identify with death rather than life. The person you were as a mortal would be horrified by what you have become, and some part of you knows this even as you try to embrace your new nature. The magical power you gain through lichdom also becomes a burden in unexpected ways. You are among the most powerful spellcasters in existence. You can cast 9th level spells, the pinnacle of arcane magic. You can reshape reality, stop time, create demoplanes, wish things into existence. This power is intoxicating at first, the fulfillment of a wizard's greatest ambitions. But power without purpose becomes meaningless, and purpose becomes elusive when you have eternity to accomplish any goal. What do you do with ultimate power when you have 1,000 years already behind you and infinite years ahead? You can conquer kingdoms, but kingdoms rise and fall. And after watching this cycle repeat a dozen times, the exercise loses meaning. You can accumulate wealth, but what purpose does wealth serve when you have no physical needs and no one to share your life with? You can pursue knowledge, and many liches do obsessively pursue ever deeper magical understanding. But knowledge for its own sake eventually feels empty when there is no broader context or purpose for that knowledge. The combination of ultimate power and ultimate emptiness creates a unique form of existential despair. You are capable of almost anything, but nothing feels worth doing. You have infinite time, but time itself has lost its meaning. You are awake and aware continuously, but your awareness encompasses an existence that has become hollow at its core. This is perhaps the deepest cost of lichdom, rarely acknowledged or discussed, because the liches who experience it have long since lost the ability to articulate their own psychological state clearly. The cumulative price also manifests in what philosophers might call a loss of finitude. Mortal existence derives much of its meaning from limitation and ending. Each moment matters because there are only a finite number of moments. Each relationship is precious because it will end. Each experience has weight because you will only live once. Death, while feared, also gives life its shape and significance. The awareness of mortality creates urgency, focus, and appreciation for the present moment. As a Lich, you have removed this structuring principle from your existence. Nothing ends. Nothing is finite. Nothing is urgent because everything can be accomplished eventually. The present moment has no special significance because it is just one moment in an infinite series of identical moments. This loss of finitude erodes the capacity for meaning itself. Life feels significant because it is limited. Undeath stretches into infinity and therefore feels significant in no particular way. You exist, you continue to exist, you will always exist, and this eternal continuation is paradoxically emptier than the limited span of mortal life. The Lich Queen stands in her sanctum, surrounded by the accumulated artifacts of 1,000 years, scrolls and books she has read hundreds of times, magical items she has created or collected across centuries. The physical evidence of her power and knowledge fills every shelf and table, but the accumulation is also a kind of prison. Each object carries memories, and she has too many memories. Each represents goals achieved, and she has achieved so many goals that achievement itself has lost its savor. She is powerful beyond mortal measure, knowledgeable beyond mortal comprehension, and empty in ways that mortals cannot imagine. She cannot sleep, she cannot dream, she cannot die, she cannot rest, and beneath all the specific costs and sacrifices, beneath the sleeplessness and the isolation and the degradation, there lies this deepest price. She has sacrificed meaning itself on the altar of immortality. She exists in a state of perpetual existence, without the structure and significance that finitude provides. This is the cumulative price of Lichdom, greater than any individual cost, emerging from the interaction of centuries of accumulated losses. She has gained everything and lost everything, and the consciousness that cannot sleep must simply continue, aware of the emptiness, unable to escape it, trapped in eternal awareness of what immortality truly costs. The weight of eternal wakefulness eventually becomes unbearable, even for beings of tremendous power and in human psychology. Throughout the long history of liches, across the Forgotten Realms and beyond, many have attempted to find some way to achieve respite from continuous consciousness. These attempts take many forms, from magical experimentation to elaborate rituals, from self-imposed dormancy to consciousness-altering substances and experiences. None perfectly recreate the experience of sleep, but each represents a desperate search for relief from awareness that never ceases. The most obvious approach involves attempting to magically induce sleep through spells. A Lich might cast sleep on themselves, or have a willing assistant cast it, hoping that magic can accomplish what biology cannot. Based on the mechanics of sleep magic in the game, the spell fails immediately. Sleep magic targets living creatures, affecting their natural sleep mechanisms. Undead creatures have no such mechanisms to affect. The spell simply has no target to act upon. More powerful sleep effects, like the 8th level spell Feeble Mind, theoretically reduce a creature's intelligence to animal level, which might seem like a form of unconsciousness, but Feeble Mind specifically affects the minds of living creatures. And even if it could affect a Lich, reducing your intelligence does not grant rest. It simply makes you a Lich with severely impaired mental function, still conscious but unable to think clearly. Some Liches might experiment with time stop and similar temporal magic, hoping to create periods where consciousness is suspended. You cast time stop, freezing yourself in time for a period that, from an external perspective, might last weeks or months. The hope is that this temporal suspension might provide the experience of discontinuity that sleep offers, but time stop does not work this way according to the spell's mechanics. From your perspective, no time passes at all. You cast the spell and immediately experience the spell's end with no sense of duration between. There is no rest, no break in consciousness, no refreshment of mind or spirit. You simply skip forward in time without experiencing the interval, gaining none of the benefits that sleep provides. More sophisticated attempts might involve creating artificial realms designed to simulate dream experiences. A Lich might use demiplane or other reality-shaping magic to create a pocket dimension structured according to dream logic rather than normal physical laws. Within this artificial dream realm, gravity might be optional. Architecture might shift based on thought. Impossible events might occur without explanation. You enter this space hoping that experiencing dreamlike scenarios might provide some psychological equivalent to actual dreaming. These artificial dream realms can be quite elaborate. You might spend decades designing the perfect environment, building landscapes from your memories mixed with pure fantasy, populating the space with illusions or summoned creatures that act out narratives you have scripted. You might use enchantment magic on yourself to lower your critical faculties, making yourself more willing to accept the impossible events as real rather than recognizing them as staged illusions. With sufficient investment of time and magical resources, you can create experiences that closely approximate the surface features of dreams. But they remain fundamentally different from genuine dreams in one critical aspect: they are consciously constructed and controlled. You know you created this realm. You know the impossible events are the result of magic you cast. You can end the experience at any time through an act of will. This conscious control and awareness prevents the artificial dreams from providing the psychological processing and integration that real dreams offer. Dreams arise from the unconscious, revealing patterns and connections that conscious thought misses. Your artificial dreams contain only what you consciously put there, offering entertainment perhaps, but no genuine insight or psychological benefit. Some liches might attempt self-imposed dormancy as an alternative to sleep. You might seal yourself within your phylactery, withdrawing your consciousness from your body and entering a state of minimal awareness within the object that contains your soul. With sufficient magical preparation, you can remain in this dormant state for years, decades, or even centuries, emerging only when specific conditions are met. A magical alarm might wake you when intruders approach your lair. A temporal trigger might rouse you after a set number of years. An external summons from a trusted servant might call you back to activity. This dormancy resembles sleep in some ways. Time passes while you are unconscious of its passing. When you emerge, you experience a sense of discontinuity, a gap between the moment you entered dormancy and the moment of your awakening. The experience might even be pleasant, offering a break from the continuous awareness that normally defines your existence. But the dormancy also carries significant risks that sleep does not. While dormant, you are completely vulnerable. If enemies discover your phylactery's location, they can destroy it before you have any chance to respond. You trust your defensive wards and hidden location to protect you. But the absolute vulnerability of dormancy means that many liches would consider it too dangerous to attempt. Additionally, dormancy within the phylactery is not truly restful in the way that sleep is restful. You are not unconscious in any normal sense. Instead, you might exist in a state of extreme sensory deprivation, your consciousness reduced to a minimal level, but never entirely absent. The experience could be closer to being buried alive than to sleeping. Some liches might emerge from extended dormancy more disturbed and psychologically damaged than they were when they entered. The isolation and sensory deprivation, creating new traumas rather than relieving existing burdens. Alchemy and substance-based approaches represent another avenue of experimentation. Various magical substances and potions exist that alter consciousness in living beings. Dream essences, distilled from the plane of dreams itself, can induce vivid hallucinations and altered states. Certain funguses and plants from the Underdark produce consciousness-altering effects. Alchemy can create compounds that affect thought, perception, and emotion. A lich might consume these substances, hoping they will provide some form of mental respite, even if they cannot induce sleep. The results are likely unpredictable and often disappointing. Many consciousness-altering substances work by affecting brain chemistry, which means they would have no effect on undead creatures whose brains are not functioning biologically. Those substances that do work through magical rather than chemical means might affect a lich, but the effects would likely be far less profound than in living creatures. You might experience mild alterations in perception or thought, but nothing approaching the deep transformation that the substances induce in mortals. The undead condition provides a kind of baseline stability that resists dramatic shifts in consciousness, making it difficult to achieve altered states through external means. Some liches turn to meditation, practices far more elaborate than the simple trance required for spell preparation. You might develop systems of meditation inspired by monastic traditions, spending hours in focused contemplation of abstract concepts or visualization exercises. The goal is to achieve a state of consciousness so different from normal awareness that it provides relief from the burden of ordinary thought. With sufficient practice and discipline, you might reach states where your continuous consciousness feels less oppressive, where the flow of time and experience becomes more bearable. These advanced meditation practices can be genuinely helpful for managing the psychological burden of eternal wakefulness. They provide structure and purpose to hours that would otherwise be empty. They offer techniques for organizing and managing the vast accumulation of memories and experiences. They create intentional mental states that, while not sleep, at least provide variety and respite from normal awareness. Many ancient liches likely become deeply invested in meditation as the only reliable method for maintaining psychological stability across centuries of undeath. But even the most advanced meditation cannot replicate what sleep accomplishes. Meditation is always a conscious practice, requiring will and attention. Sleep is automatic, occurring naturally when biological conditions are met. Meditation might create moments of peace or insight, but it cannot provide the comprehensive psychological restoration that sleep delivers unconsciously and effortlessly. The meditative practices become another task to accomplish, another thing you must consciously do to maintain yourself, adding to your burdens even as they help you manage those burdens. A few rare liches have attempted to reverse their transformation, seeking to return to mortal life, specifically to regain the ability to sleep and dream. This is extraordinarily difficult and dangerous. Lichdom is designed to be permanent. The phylactery binds your soul in place with powerful necromantic magic that resists any attempt at reversal. Various methods exist in the deepest lore. Wish spells used in specific ways, intervention by powerful celestial beings, pilgrimages to holy sites, and rituals of atonement. Complex magical workings that slowly unravel the necromantic bonds. Even when these methods succeed in destroying the phylactery and freeing the soul, the process is not simple return to life. Your body has been dead for centuries. It cannot simply resume biological function. The soul, if freed, might travel to the afterlife it was always meant to reach, which means you die in truth rather than returning to mortal life. Some sources suggest that exceptionally powerful magic might allow a lich to be transformed into a living being again. But this would require resources and power beyond what most liches can access. And it requires a willingness to sacrifice immortality that few liches possess. The ultimate conclusion that most liches reach is that there is no true respite from eternal wakefulness. Sleep cannot be magically induced or artificially recreated. Dreams cannot be genuinely experienced by undead consciousness. The best that can be achieved is management and coping, finding ways to make continuous awareness somewhat more bearable without ever truly escaping it. The meditations the artificial dreams, the elaborate rituals. All of these are attempts to live with a condition that cannot be cured. Some liches develop elaborate personal rituals that provide psychological structure, even if they provide no actual rest. You might establish a nightly routine where you perform the same activities at the same time, creating an artificial cycle that mimics the daily rhythm of waking and sleeping. You might designate certain periods as quiet time where you withdraw from all external interaction, sitting in meditation or reviewing memories, creating boundaries that separate one period from another, even though your consciousness flows unbroken through all of them. These rituals serve no magical purpose and provide no actual restoration, but they help maintain the illusion of structure and normalcy in an existence that has neither. The search for respite also reveals the full horror of what has been sacrificed. If you did not miss sleep and dreams, you would not seek ways to recreate them. If eternal wakefulness felt natural and comfortable, you would not experiment with dangerous magic and elaborate rituals trying to escape it. The very fact that liches throughout the ages have sought relief from continuous consciousness demonstrates that this existence is not the triumph over limitation that it appears to be. It is a prison, and the bars are made of awareness that never stops, perception that never dims, consciousness that continues unbroken across centuries without mercy or relief. The Lich Queen sits in her meditation chamber, engaging in the elaborate visualization exercises she has perfected over 500 years of practice. She creates intricate mental landscapes, walks through memory palaces, focuses her consciousness on abstract patterns that provide brief respite from normal thought. The practices help. They make existence somewhat more bearable. But when the meditation ends, as it always must, she returns to the continuous awareness that defines her existence. She is awake. She has been awake for 5 centuries. She will be awake for centuries more. And no magic, no ritual, no practice can grant her what she lost when she drank the poison and felt her heart stop for the final time. She can never rest. She can never truly rest, and the search for respite, no matter how elaborate or magical, cannot change this fundamental reality of her undead existence. After exploring the nature of sleeplessness from every angle, after examining the biological, psychological, magical, and existential dimensions of eternal wakefulness, we arrive at a final understanding. The Lich Queen's dilemma for sleep is not simply that she cannot sleep. It is that she exists in a fundamentally different mode of being from all living creatures, a mode where the natural rhythms and structures that give life its shape and meaning have been removed, leaving only the raw fact of continuous existence stretching toward infinity. Time itself becomes the truest measure of what has been lost. For a living being, time is structured and meaningful. Days are marked by the cycle of waking and sleeping. Weeks and months are measured by these accumulated days. Years build from months, creating a temporal architecture where past, present, and future feel distinct and significant. Each day begins fresh with waking and ends complete with sleep. This creates forward motion, a sense of progression, a feeling that time is carrying you somewhere, even if you do not know the destination. For the Lich, time loses this structure. Without the daily boundary of sleep, days cease to be discrete units. They blur into continuous experience, where yesterday and today and tomorrow are just arbitrary labels applied to an undifferentiated stream of consciousness. After centuries, based on the documented temporal disorientation that ancient liches display, the very concept of a day becomes almost meaningless. You mark time by external events rather than internal experience. The seasons change around you. Mortals are born, live, and die. Kingdoms rise and fall. But your own experience remains continuous, unbroken, always the same regardless of what external changes occur. This creates a strange relationship with eternity. Mortals fear death and crave more time. They wish they could live longer, accomplish more, experience more before their time runs out. The Lich has achieved exactly what mortals wish for: infinite time. The ability to experience everything, learn everything, accomplish everything given enough centuries. But the actual experience of infinite time, based on everything we can infer from Lich behavior, is not the paradise that mortals imagine. It is a kind of hell where nothing ends and therefore nothing truly begins, where everything stretches into sameness, where time itself becomes a burden rather than a gift. The eternal vigil that defines Lich existence takes on new meaning in this context. You are always watching, always aware, always conscious. This might seem like ultimate power, the ability to maintain absolute control over your domain without vulnerability or weakness. But it is also ultimate imprisonment. You cannot look away. You cannot take a break. You cannot experience that blessed interval of unconsciousness where the world continues without you and you are freed from the obligation of awareness. Living beings accept vulnerability as the price of rest. They close their eyes, lose consciousness, and trust that they will wake again. This act of surrender, repeated nightly, connects them to something larger than themselves. It acknowledges limitation, accepts mortality, and embraces the rhythm of existence rather than trying to stand outside it. The Lich refuses this surrender. You will not accept vulnerability. You will not acknowledge limitation. You stand outside the rhythm, maintaining perfect control and perfect awareness at the cost of perfect isolation. The psychology of ancient liches, those who have existed for millennia rather than mere centuries, reveals the ultimate destination of this path based on accounts from those who have encountered them. The mind continues to function in technical terms. Spells are still cast correctly. Complex plans are still formed and executed. Magical research continues to produce results, but something essential appears to have been lost. The consciousness that remains seems more like a machine than a person executing functions without the animating spark of genuine subjectivity. The personality that once existed has been worn away by ages of sleepless existence, leaving only processes and patterns that continue without purpose or meaning. This transformation is so gradual that the Lich experiencing it might not recognize it as it occurs. Each century erodes a little more humanity, a little more capacity for genuine feeling and connection. The changes happen so slowly across such vast time scales that there is no clear moment where you can say that personhood was lost. You simply continue, and over millennia, what continues becomes increasingly mechanical, increasingly alien, increasingly separate from anything recognizable as conscious life. Some philosophers in the Forgotten Realms argue that this represents a fate worse than death. Death is ending, yes, but it is also transition. The soul moves to its appointed afterlife. Existence continues in a different form. There is change, transformation, the possibility of peace or reward, or at least resolution. Lichdom removes these possibilities. You are trapped in undeath, unable to move forward or backward, locked in a state that is neither life nor death, but something terrible suspended between them. You exist without living, continue without progressing, persist without purpose. But other voices offer different interpretations. Perhaps the transformation of consciousness across millennia is not loss, but evolution. Perhaps the Lich, who has existed for 3,000 years, operates on a level so far beyond mortal comprehension that our judgments about personhood and meaning simply do not apply. Perhaps what appears from the outside as mechanical emptiness is actually a form of consciousness so advanced and alien that it transcends categories of alive or dead, person or thing, meaningful or meaningless. The lore does not definitively answer these questions. Ancient liches remain mysterious, their inner experiences unknown even to other undead. What can be stated with certainty, based on consistent accounts across centuries of observation, is that eternal wakefulness transforms consciousness in ways both profound and irreversible. The being that emerges from millennia of sleepless existence is not the same as the wizard who first drank the poison of transformation. Whether this transformation represents tragedy or transcendence depends on perspective, values, and perhaps on questions that have no clear answers. The acceptance that many liches eventually reach is neither peaceful nor despairing, but something in between. You stop seeking sleep because you understand it is impossible. You stop trying to recreate dreams because you recognize that artificial constructs cannot replace genuine, unconscious experience. You stop searching for respite because you accept that respite is not available. Instead, you simply continue. You exist in eternal wakefulness because that is your nature now. You maintain consciousness across centuries because you have no alternative. The dilemma remains forever unresolved, but you learn to exist within it rather than constantly struggling against it. This acceptance does not bring happiness or peace. It brings a kind of grim determination, an acknowledgement that this is simply what existence means now. The burden does not lift, the weight does not lessen, but you develop the strength, or perhaps the numbness to carry it indefinitely. This is what eternal existence looks like from the inside, based on everything we can infer from documented Lich behaviors. Not the triumph of will over limitation, but the grinding persistence of consciousness that cannot rest, carrying on simply because cessation is not available. The Lich Queen stands at the window of her tower, looking out over lands she has ruled for 5 centuries. Dawn is breaking, the sun rising over the horizon in a daily cycle that has repeated 182,500 times since her transformation. For mortals sleeping in the villages below, this dawn represents a new beginning, the end of night's rest and the start of a fresh day. For her, it is simply another moment in an unbroken chain of moments stretching back 500 years and forward into an infinity she cannot escape. She does not feel the hope that dawn brings to living beings. She does not experience the refreshment of waking after sleep. The sunrise is just a change in light levels, notable only because it marks another rotation of the planet, another increment of time passing in an existence that has too much time. She is awake now as she was awake yesterday, and will be awake tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, forever. This is her power. This is her achievement. This is the price she paid and continues to pay with every moment of consciousness that knows no relief. The dilemma for sleep is not a problem to be solved. It is a condition to be endured. There is no solution, no magic that can restore what was sacrificed, no ritual that can grant true rest to a being who has removed herself from the cycle of life and death. The Lich Queen will never sleep again. She will never dream again. She will continue in eternal wakefulness until her phylactery is destroyed or the universe itself ends. This is what immortality actually means when stripped of romantic fantasy and examined in its lived reality. And yet she persists. Despite the weight, despite the emptiness, despite the endless wakefulness that has become her existence, she continues. Perhaps this persistence itself reveals something important. Perhaps the fact that consciousness can endure such conditions, can continue across millennia of sleepless existence, demonstrates a resilience or strength that transcends human understanding. Or perhaps it simply demonstrates that consciousness, once established, is very difficult to eliminate, persisting even in conditions that make existence itself questionable in purpose and value. The sun rises fully, flooding her chamber with morning light. The mortals below wake and begin their days. The world continues its endless cycles of light and darkness, waking and sleeping, life and death. And the Lich Queen stands eternal, watching it all with eyes that never close, consciousness that never rests, awareness that knows no mercy and grants no respite. This is her dilemma. This is her existence. This is the eternal vigil of undeath. and it is both her triumph and her curse, her power and her prison, her immortality and her doom. She is awake. She will always be awake, and in this simple, terrible fact lies the full weight of what it means to be the Lich Queen who can never sleep.